Welcome to this FAME Leadership Screencast, part of the Need to Know series. FAME Module 1 provides an overview of formative assessment. In this short screencast, we'll review Module 1 content, highlight what FAME Cohort 1 leaders have told us is most valuable about this module, and share information about what school leaders can do to address issues that often arise in Module 1 implementation. The 4 lessons in Module 1 have teachers explore the definition and learn about the 5 attributes of formative assessment, develop an understanding of the research base of formative assessment, and identify formative assessment as part of a balanced assessment system. Let's look at each of these in turn. In 2006, the Council on Chief State School Officers developed the definition of formative assessment for use in the United States. This definition clarifies that formative assessment is a continuous process that takes place during instruction and emphasizes that the work of formative assessment takes place between students and teachers. The 5 attributes of formative assessment, also developed by the Council on Chief State School Officers, are introduced in Lesson 2. The FAME modules are designed around these 5 attributes, which represent visible elements present in formative assessment classrooms. Formative assessment involves teachers regularly using these attributes during daily classroom instruction. The research base in formative assessment is reviewed in Lesson 3. Teachers explore findings from key researchers that impact our understanding of learning and the value of formative assessment. Here's one concept presented in Lesson 3. Royce Sadler's research emphasizes that for students to be able to effectively engage in learning, 3 things must happen. First, students must have an idea of what they are moving toward, what we would call a learning goal, and what Sadler refers to as a reference point. Second, students need to have an understanding of where they currently are in their learning. Only once they know where they are in their learning can they compare their current level of performance with the reference point. In order to take next steps in learning, students need to learn and apply strategies that will help them close that gap between their current understanding and the learning goal. This research provides a clear connection to the guiding questions used in FAME, which align with FAME's module content. Each element of formative assessment helps to answer one of the 3 questions that are originally posed in Sadler's research. In formative assessment, then, the teacher's role shifts to structure classroom activities so that students themselves have a clear understanding of the learning goals, know what success will look like, and provide themselves with ongoing evidence from a variety of sources in order to close the gap. Let's listen as Lee Sutton, principal of Lockerman Middle School, talks about this shift in the roles of teachers and students that took place during FAME implementation in Cohort 1.
Definition of formative assessment is it's student-centered learning, students becoming knowledgeable of and understanding their own continuum of learning, and then being able to set goals, make a plan of action, and set a criteria for success, but also be able to recognize where they are in that continuum of learning, and the teacher's responsibility is to provide explicit instruction to students on how to learn where you are in your learning progressions. It's not just providing them with steps, it's to teach them how to recognize where they are. The teacher's responsibility also is to continuously, through a variety of methods, assess and then provide feedback so students are aware of where they are, and then guidance of getting to the next step.
Our hope for teachers is that through these first few lessons in Module 1, that they'll begin to recognize that formative assessment is not just good instruction, nor does it involve just a small tweak in their practice. Rather, as Lee Sutton described, Our hope is that conversations begin to take place in your school and that teachers explore the idea that formative assessment involves new roles for students and teachers. In Lesson 4, we introduce this visual by Susan Burkhart, which helps teachers think about how formative assessment is situated within a larger system of assessment. The goal of this lesson, and of the application activity in the Module 1 Community of Practice, is to help teachers consider which of their current assessment practices may have to change in order to effectively implement formative assessment. We've heard from famed Cohort 1 school leaders that the messages in Module 1 are well timed, as the kinds of instructional changes that are embedded in formative assessment research and practice promote the kind of deeper learning and application that is required of the new standards. But to help introduce these ideas, there are several steps that leaders must take as teachers begin to explore formative assessment content. Let's turn to the 4 leadership essentials that will help you and your teachers as you begin to work on these shifts. Leadership essential number 1, frame a compelling rationale for formative assessment implementation. A compelling vision for formative assessment most often involves considering how the student's role will change in a formative classroom. We've learned from both research and practice that while teachers do have to learn new skills and change practice to implement formative assessment, the motivating factor is that this work results in something they have often wanted. One Maryland teacher told me last year, "I wish I'd known about this when I went into teaching 15 years ago. I thought I was doing this, but now I see that this really works." What she was saying is that it works to really improve students' ability to learn on their own. Start there. Leadership essential number 2, resolve definitional issues early. Varied starting points in formative assessment are expected. Help teachers consider how their existing definitions of formative assessment are similar to or different than the CCSSO definition and the research findings. Coming to a shared definition is an essential first step for those taking this course, and with other faculty as well. In this next clip, listen as Crystal Davis and Brian King from Stoddard Middle School describe their shift in thinking about the definition of formative assessment.
My thinking about formative assessment has significantly changed since being a part of FAME. I think that in this, at least in the past, my approach to formative assessment, I used to view it as an instant in the classroom. I think the easiest example for most teachers to connect with, if you ask them to talk about formative assessment, I think exit slip would be the first couple words that the great majority of teachers would talk about in terms of how do you do formative assessment in your classroom. And they're not wrong. I mean, an exit slip is a legitimate piece of formative assessment, but what FAME has kind of helped me realize and understand at a better level is that formative assessment is a process. So it's something that really in a classroom is happening throughout the lesson and not just a snapshot like an exit slip might be. So that understanding that both students and teachers have an active role in formative assessment been a shift for me.
I would totally second that. It's definitely shifted from what I thought formative assessment was in being, I used to think it was a tangible item that teachers would collect, grade, and then guide their instruction from there. But I've definitely seen the shift in that it's definitely a process and how we work through it, and it makes teachers plan the details of their lessons more thoroughly. The other huge shift that I've seen is that I used to think it was only teacher-centered, that teachers would take the information, teachers would make the decisions, and teachers would decide what to do next. Where now I'm seeing students are so much more involved in the process and in formative assessment, and that they can also guide their learning, and they provide the feedback to the teachers, which then they can give feedback back, and it's just a cycle.
Leadership essential number 3, anticipate and plan for a ripple effect. Prepare for the idea that the module content will have a ripple effect in your building. as new practices are considered in light of current practices. In particular, the shift from current assessment practices to the use of more formative assessment will require dialogue around which aspects of current practice should shift. Teachers may need to consider different ways of approaching grading and reporting, to rethink how they plan and administer various assessments, and how they use those results. This may also involve discussions with parents, as parental reporting practices, especially at the high school level, may need to shift as well. Let's listen as Shannon Zepp, an assistant principal at Liberty High School, talks about her school's experiences thinking about grading and reporting during early FAME implementation.
We looked at some of the definitions that were provided to us through the modules, but more than that is we looked at what practices teachers were using and what that meant for student learning. So what we really focused on trying to separate grading from formative assessment, that they aren't the same thing, and that there's valuable information to come from assessment, and it doesn't have to have a grade attached in order for that to happen. And so I think that was a really big aha moment for our teachers, to not have to grade everything, that we can get valuable information from practices that are put in place without having some sort of grade attached.
Leadership essential number 4, define and communicate your leadership role. In 2013, Moss, Burkhardt, and Long published a study around the role of school leaders and pointed to 3 leadership roles in schools that had successful implementation of formative assessment. Leaders who showed more successful implementation know what to look for in classrooms because they understand formative assessment research and practice, pay attention to and communicate to teachers about what students are doing differently, and serve as lead learners who help to shape improved instructional practices over time. Clarify with teachers how you'll learn about formative assessment, how you'll support implementation, and the ways in which you plan to observe practice, provide feedback, and participate with teachers as you learn together. We've heard from leaders across Maryland that the issues that arise during Module 1 are important and necessary to resolve before teachers can begin to adopt these new instructional practices. When leaders anticipate and are involved in these discussions, teachers feel more confident to take on the new practices, and implementation issues are smoother. The leadership essentials are outlined on the FAME Leadership Considerations document. You can find this document in the FAME Leadership folder on the MSDE online learning platform. The Leadership Considerations document provides specific leadership guidance for all 5 FAME modules. Thanks for joining us. We remind you to visit us for the next screencast in the Need to Know series, 4 things leaders need to know to successfully implement FAME Module 2.